Hello, guys. Hello, everyone. So, sorry, it took me 2 days to come back to it. Welcome to part number 4. But I was fighting with the French part and the English part. So now I'm back with the part number 4. So this is what we will be talking about. So let me share my screen so you will see what is it all about today. I hope you're having a good day, by the way. So for us in Canada, it's not bad. The temperature and the we have some sunshine today, so it's not bad. Okay, so now this is what we're going to talk about. So we have 19th and 20th centuries, and I wanted to discuss about the foreign occupation and political turmoil between 1849 to 1971. So this is what we will be looking at: the political instability and economic struggles. I will give you some views about the official views about the foreign intervention in Haiti and the US involvement, and actually why and the motivations and everything. But as you will see in part number 5, I will change slightly the plan I had on part number 5. On part number 5, I really wanted to touch about the 2 days situation. But in reality, and there was a part that was the future perspectives for Haiti. But in reality, what I want to do in part number 5 will be to expand on the future perspective because I have some certain view about this. And while today perspective, it's, in my view, Haiti is in a situation where it's been a struggle since its independence. It's been 200 something years, right? Almost 300 years. So now if we got to consider the past is the past, we can't change it. The present, it's almost something we can't have any impact at the moment. IT can't have any impact at the moment simply because the Occidental bloc is actually still managed by the US, and we see we see actually currently the shit show of what's happening US, France, everywhere. So there's a new kids in the block, so to speak, with the bricks. So I will expand on that, on the future perspective for IT. But for the time being, I would say that the present is dead for IT. We need to look into the future. But now let's go back to part number 4. What you could see is that part number 3 was more like an extended view of the end of the Haitian Revolution. The Haitian Revolution, I've seen the destruction of the infrastructure, the complete infrastructure of what was making Saint-Domingue a great colony for France. So, but the end of slavery and the destruction of the complete economic structure that was making the life for Haiti and Haitians extremely difficult. So they were subject in that case to any exploitation. They couldn't find any kind of consensus politically and economically. And they were also subject to some manipulation between the French and the United States, as we could, as I could prove with some element and numbers. I could prove that there was a machination between the two, powers. Okay. Now, if we look into how can we segue from part number 3 to part number 4? We can just say that the legacy of the Haitian Revolution will continue to shape the country's future. How can it be different from part number 3? It's not possible. It's not because you're advancing in time that you will find suddenly a change in the IT's perspective. Despite the challenges, economic and political instability faced in the early years of the independence, IT persevered. They stayed free. And this is for, as I was saying in part number 3, for all the Black community, for us, it's totally amazing to see ITs, despite the struggles, to stay free. Okay. But at the same time, it's difficult for the people living in Haiti, right? So this is also a struggle for the people living there. But we have to consider also something that the country will soon face, as you will see in part before, even greater trials. So the attempts to, because on part number 3, as I was saying, the goal was to push Haiti to go back to the French, to come back as being a colony in the French Empire. And they resisted, and they stayed free, independent. So now 19th and 20th centuries were a time of foreign intervention, political instability, and more economic hardship. And you will see that now. Now let's dig into it. Political instability and economic struggles. On the political instability, we can simply say that the frequent leadership changes during that period of 1849 to 1915-16 was marked by a succession of political leaders and frequent changes in government. So, as I was saying before, every single time you have a change in the social political order, there is a transition. That transition leads to what? Bloodshed, violence, and corruption. So this instability was often fueled by internal power struggles, economic difficulties, and foreign interference. So naturally, all these foreign powers were actually putting their fingers into it. So naturally, it leads to what? Weak institutions, because Haiti struggled to establish strong and stable political institution with a vision, midterm and long-term perspective, with some level of consensus. No, it was leading to a lack of governance and accountability and corruption. Lack of accountability means corruption. This made it difficult to implement effective policies and address the country's challenges. And actually, if you think about weak institution, it means coup d'etat. Military coup d'etat were a common occurrence as ambitious generals and politicians sought to seize power. These coups often led to periods of violence, bloodshed, and political instability, and more political instability, as I was saying. Now, economic struggles. The situation was still the same for Haiti. There was a strong dependence and a strong reliance on the agriculture, particularly the sugar production, which made it vulnerable to fluctuation in global commodity prices, because naturally they were not the only place where you could produce sugar. Okay. Debt burden. The countries continued to grapple with the debt incurred during the colonial period, the debt or the indemnity that was paid to France to repay the losses of the rich slave people profiting from slavery and from Saint-Domingue, which limited its ability to invest in infrastructure and social services. And infrastructure challenges. Haiti's infrastructures was still underdeveloped. In order to bring the economy to a certain level of stability and to push an economic growth, you need to have a certain level of infrastructure. The same for civilian services. If you want to offer medical services, hospital services, or what have you. So in that case, you need to have an infrastructure to support this. And this was not developed, and it was actually hindering its economic growth and development. So it's made it difficult to transport goods, to access markets, and to provide basic services to the population, as I was saying. And on top of it, there were natural disasters. Haiti is prone to natural disasters such as hurricanes and earthquakes, which caused significant economic damage and disrupt development efforts. So every single time you wanted to achieve something, a natural disaster was crumbling everything down, right? So these elements of political and economic struggles, instability in different levels, weak institution, and foreign intervention, and foreign interference, were not yet in intervention, it will come just after, created a challenging environment for Haiti, hindering, as I said, its progress and contributing to the country's ongoing development challenges. Now, if we look into Now, let's look into the foreign intervention in Haiti, the motivations and impacts. And here I'm quoting what people are saying, what the international community is saying about Haiti. Why the foreign intervention? But I will counter all that in part number 5. I will explain a little bit in more details, or let's say the hidden reality behind it. Okay. So now the foreign intervention, the official motivations and impacts. Okay. So the official cut. Now let's dig into the foreign intervention in Haiti, the official motivations, but the real impacts, and the unofficial motivations, the real motivation. I will explain them in part number 5. Okay. While Haiti has been known for its rich natural resources, including bauxite, copper, gold, and marble, it has not been a significant producer of exporter of oil or mineral resources on a scale that is equivalent to other countries in the world. Okay. So foreign interest couldn't be as important as you can see in other countries for these commodities alone. So you know what it means. In other countries, when they have oil, they get bombed, they get disrupted, and the Americans, the French come and serve themselves on oil, which does not belong to them, but because they have the power, they do whatever they want. Okay. So it means there were resources, but not enough to motivate a real strike, so to speak. So there were foreign interference, but not yet a direct intervention. But it's coming. Okay. And supposedly the resources are not, sufficient enough to justify it. But you will see the truth later. Okay. The primary motivation for foreign intervention supposedly were primarily political, economic, and strategic, as outlined by media and the official communications of countries or nations. So desire to control Haiti's political affairs, protect economic interests, and maintain stability in the region were the main driving forces behind foreign involvement. While Haiti's natural resources have been of interest to some foreign investors, they have not been the primary catalyst for widespread foreign intervention. Oh, yeah? Okay. The country's political instability, strategic location, because yes, it is in the middle of the Caribbean, and economic potential have been more significant factors in attracting foreign attention. Oh, yes. Interesting. So the intervention was really to protect basically the interest that they had in the region, but not in Haiti itself. Haiti was minor in terms of resources. We'll see about that. Okay. So first of all, European interest. European powers, particularly France, maintain a keen interest in Haiti due to several factors. Economic interest. Yes, Haiti or Saint-Domingue had been a very lucrative colony for France. Let me change that a little bit. It was the wealthiest, the most lucrative colony for France by far, and by far. And European powers continue to have economic interest in the region. Why? I don't get it. Officially, they're saying that there are resources. Sugar productions can be done elsewhere. They have resources, but not enough to justify some interest. But why having still some interest if there's no sufficient mineral resources or oil or whatever? They sought to maintain supposedly their influence and access to markets in Haiti. Okay. Geopolitical consideration. Well, Haiti's strategic location in the Caribbean made it a valuable asset. Okay. European powers were concerned about the the potential influence of other nations such as the United States in the region. And this was in 19th century and 20th centuries. Desire for stability. Many European powers preferred a stable and predictable political environment in Haiti. They often intervened to restore order and protect the interest, even if it meant supporting, autocratic regimes. So they had some interest, but not too much, but they wanted to maintain the control over it. Okay. So now the US involvement from 1915 to 1934. There was no direct US military occupation of Haiti between 1849 and 1915, okay? However, the United States did maintain an interest in the region and intervened in Haitian affairs in other ways, okay? But what were the main reasons why the United States were not yet intervening within Haiti's affair directly, okay? First of all, the US Civil War. The American Civil War from 1861 to 1865 diverted the attentions and the resources of the United States away from foreign affairs, including its Caribbean interest. And they were also focusing on Cuba. In the late 19th century, the United States became increasingly interested in Cuba, which was then a Spanish colony. The US intervened in Cuba's war for independence against Spain, leading to the Spanish-American War of 1898. This focus on Cuba may have diverted attention away from Haiti. European influence. European powers, as I said, particularly France, maintained a strong presence in the Caribbean and were reluctant to allow the United States to dominate the region. This limited the US ability to intervene in Haiti without facing opposition from other European nations. At the time, we have to consider that US was still a nation in development, didn't have the strength they have today, or they had in the middle of the century, of the 20th century. Haitian stability. During certain period, Haiti experienced relative political stability and economic growth, which reduced the need for US intervention. Okay. Changing global context. Okay. Now the outbreak of World War I in 1914 diverted the attention of resources of the United States away from the Caribbean towards the European theater. So the interest was also to gain more stability in Europe. Why? Mostly because all the trade that were beneficial to the development of the United States was basically turned towards Europe. If Europe was in war and not in a stable economy, they couldn't trade or make benefit of what they were producing. Therefore, they had to intervene to be in a First World War against Germany and to fight the war. Okay. So now we understand why the US weren't really in direct intervention in Haiti from 1849 to 1915. Nonetheless, they continued to have an interest in the region and to influence Asian affairs through diplomatic channels and economic relations. The countries eventually will have an occupation in 1915 was a result of a combination of factors, including political instability, economic challenges, and the changing geopolitical landscape. And also because the US wanted to expand the influence in the Caribbean and didn't want to have the Spanish or the French to have more say in something that was almost touching the US, because Florida, for example, is extremely close. Okay. Now, the United States intervened in Haiti in 1915, citing political instability, and the need to protect American interest. As I said, no economic growth. Haiti was subject to exploitation from different foreign powers. But now the American wanted to protect the interest and didn't want anyone else to come. So they wanted to protect the interest against others. So whatever you want, it's no longer possible for you. This territory is ours. That's what it meant. The US occupation lasted until 1934 and had a profound impact on the country. Economic domination. The US imposed customs, receivership, giving it control over Haiti's finance. This allowed the United States to extract significant economic benefit from the country while limiting Haiti's ability to develop its own economic policies. Okay, you will cut because we'll go back on the USA intervention. Yes. Okay. So finally, in 1915, the United States intervened in Haiti to occupy the land, to occupy Haiti, citing, political instability and the need to protect American interests. Supposedly, the US occupation lasted until 1934 and had a profound impact on the country. First of all, we need to explain a little bit what was happening. Okay. So for years, economic domination. So now it's economic domination. Now, for years, the US business interest led by the National City Bank of New York, this is the predecessor of the Citigroup. The Citigroup now is a bank with multiple subsidiaries across the country. So the National City Bank of New York had pushed for American control over Haiti. They persuaded the US State Department to remove gold from the vaults of Haiti's national bank. So they came with boats and soldiers, and accelerated by the cost of the imminent Great World War from 1914 to 1918 in Europe, US Navy came with boats and soldiers, and they still they stole 500,000 they stole $500,000 worth of gold. It was a precursor to a full-scale invasion of Haiti. So now, just right after this, they invaded Haiti. The US imposed a customs receivership, giving it control over Haiti's finance. So they were controlling the finance of the country. This allowed the US to extract significant economic benefits from the country while limiting Haiti's ability to develop its own economic policies. So they were controlling everything. They stole the money first, and then they were controlling the finances of the country. Now, political interference. Naturally, the US military occupation lasted 19 years, the longest in US history, if you consider even including with Afghanistan. Afghanistan was about 20 years. So after Afghanistan, it was the longest, military occupation from the US. So the US intervened in the Haitian politics, supporting friendly leaders and suppressing dissent by assassination and removing Partie eventually. So the social and cultural impact. Cut. Social and cultural impact. The US occupation also had a significant social and cultural impact. The introduction of American customs and values led to changes in Haitian society, but also contributed to a sense of resentment and resistance amongst the population. But why? They have great intention. While the Americans, they forced Haitians to build roads for no pay, and soldiers shot those who tried to escape. Many Haitians saw this as a return to slavery, naturally. Now, post-occupation period, 1934 to 1971. So now we're advancing in time. Following the US occupation, Haiti's experienced a period of political instability and economic challenges. Once again, several military leaders and politicians seized powers through coup d'etat, leading to a decline in living standards and limited democratic process and progress as well. The Duvalier era from 1957 to 1971, the most notorious dictatorships in Haiti were those of François Duvalier, Papa Doc, and his son Jean-Claude Duvalier, Baby Doc. The Duvaliers ruled Haiti with an iron fist, suppressing dissent and using violence to maintain power. Their regimes were characterized by corruption, human rights abuses, and economic mismanagement. Cut on the post-occupation period. We'll come back to that. Okay, now post-occupation period, 1934 to 1971, and we'll touch a little bit extended period to 1986. Okay, just for the Duvalier era. Okay, following the U.S. occupation, Haiti experienced a period of political instability and economic challenges. Several military leaders and politicians seized power through coup d'etat, leading to a decline in living standard and limited democratic progress. The Duvalier era from 1957 to 1986. I know I said 71, but I'm touching upon these two persons, the father and the son. The most notorious dictatorships in Haiti were those of François Duvalier, Papa Doc, and his son Jean-Claude Duvalier, Baby Doc. The Duvaliers ruled Haiti with an iron fist, suppressing dissent and using violence to maintain power. The regime were characterized by power, corruption, human rights abuses, and economic mismanagement. Also, we can name more economic struggles. Haiti continued to face economic challenges, including poverty, inequality, and limited access to education and healthcare. The country's dependence on agriculture and its vulnerability to natural disasters made it difficult to achieve sustainable economic development. International isolation. Despite the end of the US occupation, Haiti remained isolated from the international community. This isolation limited its access to foreign aid and investment, hindering its development. But also because you have to appreciate that for the international community, Haiti was reserved to the US. So no one could touch Haiti without the appropriate, validation of the US. So the US was containing Haiti's in his backyard, like as if it was part of the US, so to speak. Okay. The period between the US occupation and the fall of the Duvalier regime was marked by political instability, more economic hardship, and human rights abuses. These challenges would continue to shape Haiti's futures in the decades to come. This is really, it leads as well to the degradation of social and economic conditions. The combination of foreign intervention, political instability, and economic struggles led to significant degradation of social and economic conditions in Haiti. Poverty and inequality, they were widespread, with a large portion of the population living in extreme poverty. Limited access to education and healthcare. Many Haitians lacked access to basic education, healthcare services, which further exacerbated the economic hardship. Human rights abuse. Naturally, if you have transition between powers, as I said, leads to violence, bloodshed. So political repression, torture, extrajudicial killings, political killings and assassinations. We can naturally say that in conclusion, what we can say is this. Okay, now to finish up on the part number 4, what I could say is once again, it's a disgrace to see how Haiti was treated from the beginning of of its successful revolution, to gain emancipation, to become a real nation, and not to being, accepted as such, just because of what I've explained in part number 3. You could accept this from the US because they were a white nation. When you're a black nation, you are treated very differently. And then what we can say is that, about the point number 4, on the conclusion, we can say the 19th and 20th centuries were a tumultuous period for Haiti, marked by foreign intervention, political instability, and economic hardship. Was it different from part 3? Not really. The difference is you have now foreign intervention. When foreign intervention, as we could see that, US went in because they wanted to steal gold, okay, and because of other reasons that I will explain in part 5. Part 5, I will dig a little bit deeper into the real reasons. And actually, it leads to the country's vulnerability to external pressures and its limited economic opportunities and its history of human rights abuses and all consequences of these factors because of what? Political instability. And humans being humans, humans are also, by definition, Black, Asian, white. They have a form of greediness inside of us, which is led by ego and not in the sense of compassion for others. So we have an infinite capacity to do good, but we have a certain capability to do badly and to do bad to others without considering, what we're doing or saying to others. And this had an impact on Haiti, because of this, and the autocratic leaders from the early stage of the Haiti's independence. This is what we could see. Okay. However, despite these challenges, Haiti, on the other side, has demonstrated remarkable resilience and a strong spirit to survival. They didn't come back to the French. They didn't ask to come back to slavery, to go back to under the wings. The Haitian people have endured countless hardships, and yet they continue to strive hoping for a better future. The diaspora of Haitian people are extremely smart people. I have a lot of friends on the Asian community. They're extremely talented and smart people. The country has a rich diaspora, a rich cultural heritage, and vibrant traditions. They offer hope for a brighter future. And I'm sure, the Asian diaspora will be more likely to return when Haiti will become under, a brighter, future. Now, Haiti enters the 20th century, and it faces new challenges, but you will see in the part number 5, great opportunities in my view. The countries must address issues such as poverty, inequality, and the logic of what is politics? What is politics? Isn't that to make life of others better than to enrich myself? To look at the climate change while seeking to build a more just and equitable society. The legacy of the past, well, you can't change it. But the legacy of the past is interesting because Haiti's had great visionaries, Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. However, the past will continue to shape Haiti's future for a short period of time. There's no escape from the future. You can't do whatever you want. You are the result of your life experience. We are nothing else than our life experiences. And the country's ability to overcome its challenges will depend on its resilience, determination, vision, but also the support of the international community. But which international community? This is what you will see in part number 5. Okay. Thanks very much for your time. As always, I really thank you for the views that the time you're taking to look at these videos. I know I tend to be slightly longer than typical other videos you see on YouTube or on Rumble, but I'm really glad to do these videos and to share my view on that, on these elements. On these elements. Thank you, and have a great day.